Next step in development for that Arrow R9 exhaust is we're going to test how it works with the DNA Stage 2 Airbox lid. And I got them laid out here. This is your stock Airbox and filter. And a DNA Stage 2 lid replaces both of these items and just bolts onto the top of the Airbox, replacing them both. With all of the MT09 specific exhaust, this made a really nice improvement in mid-range with minimal cost on peak power. With this Arrow exhaust not working as well through the middle, conventional logic would say, oh, we'll just bring that back up. And sometimes things don't always work out the way we think. So definitely got to test it out and get the mapping all set up for it. I've also ordered a new rear sprocket for my MT09 so that I can match the gearing on the R9. So I can finalize at least my street throttle maps for it, so that when I get an R9 in here, hopefully next week or end of this week, to do my testing, that I have those throttle maps fully dialed in for the street. So let's see how the Arrow R9 exhaust with the DNA Stage 2 works out. I've been a big supporter of the DNA Stage 2 Airbox lid on the 24 MT09 since I started testing it, because with all those exhausts, it really worked well. It gives you a nice bump in the mid-range without much loss in power and top end. I'm almost done mapping out for the DNA Stage 2 with the Arrow R9 exhaust, and as you'll see when I go to the charts, or if I've already shown the charts, it really is losing quite a bit on top, and in an exchange that I don't think is worth it, especially for the focus of the R9. And a lot of times, this isn't uncommon. When I put the first graphs up, when I first saw the graphs on the Arrow R9 exhaust, and I saw that it didn't work great in the mid-range, and it really was trying to do its work on the top end, I had initially thought, well, that might not be a good match with the DNA Stage 2 lid. A lot of people will have this tendency to think, well, you know, hey, it's not so great here, but this other part is great there, and then the two of them will put together and it'll work better. And generally, that's not how things work. Things have to match when we talk about components, especially intake and exhaust and stuff like that. And so what ended up happening, sometimes you get the worst of both worlds instead of the best, and that's kind of what I feel like what's going on with the Arrow exhaust and the DNA Stage 2 lid. So I'm going to put my modified Airbox that I came up with on the MT09 that didn't really do much with the Sprint filter, and I'm hoping, and I'm expecting actually, that it will perform a lot better with the Arrow exhaust and give us some gains on top. So what I have is a Sprint filter. The DNA filter will perform similarly, but usually what I've always found when I test them back-to-back, the Sprint performs a little bit better. And then what I did is, you can see the length of the stock snorkels, and I've just cut them down. On the previous generation, there were some trumpets up here that I would remove, but Yamaha went ahead and removed them on the new Airbox. And then so people will always, when they start talking about the Airbox mod, two things, we'll always talk about water inclusion, getting water in the Airbox. Really not a concern. We're not changing the intake and where it goes, and we're not making big holes in it, so we're not going to lose a bunch of bottom end and mid-range, because we're not hurting the velocity. All we're doing is giving it a more straight, efficient path. You can see over here that the air would have to go all the way to the bottom, and they actually had to bevel this one here because it's so close to the bottom of the Airbox, and then the air will have to curve around it and come back. I was surprised when I tested this on the 24 MT09 that by shortening them and just giving them a more direct, efficient path, that we really didn't see any gains. But like I said, maybe with this Arrow system that's more focused on top end performance, we might actually see some gains with this. And I'm definitely thinking when we do some things to make more power in the upper range and extend it even more, that this setup will be better than the DNA Stage 2 lid. Won't know till I get my R9 and put some cams in it, but at least for now, we can test this with the Arrow R9 exhaust. So let's see what happens. To the dyno runs we go. And so what we're comparing here is, so about I don't know, about a week ago, I came up with, I fully mapped out the R9 Arrow exhaust with my flash and the stock Airbox. So over the last week or so, I've been working on the DNA Stage 2 lid, which is the blue line. And you can see we did gain some in the mid-range, between 7,500 and about 5,250. But we lost what I don't consider a fair trade on top. We'll take a look at this. I'll have the cursor there in a second. But I guess it just depends what you're really going to be using the bike for. If you feel that you're never really going to be up here above 8,000, you should have bought an MT09. But either way, then I guess, maybe make this trade. But I think it's a lot of money for this trade-off, and it's not a trade-off I would make. But let's take a look at where we're at with those horsepower losses. And you can see when I bring my cursor over to about 8,500 RPMs, it's about a 3 horsepower loss. I mean, I did pick one of the highest spots, but it's definitely 1.5 to 3 horsepower. Pretty much all up here. Again, it just depends on your focus, what you're going to be using the bike for. But for me, I would go with the stock Airbox. So as you saw previously in the video, after I got these results, I wanted to check and see what would happen if I added the sprint filter and Airbox mod. So let's take a look at those. And to my surprise and disappointment, I didn't really get anything better. These couple little areas that we have a little improvement with the stock Airbox lid and stock filter, and just going to chalk that up to it was done a week ago. Air is a little different. Correction factors aren't always perfect. The only place that's really noticeably better is with the Airbox mod and the sprint filter. It held on better, but at this point, that's not really worth it. We did pick up a little bit here, lost a little bit there, but again, for me, I'm going to call this really no change, which was surprising to me, but this is why I test. And just to illustrate it even more, you can see that I tried all of the different setups with the stock Airbox versus Airbox mod versus sprint filter versus not sprint filter, and they're all basically the same and certainly not worth doing or messing with. So then it occurred to me it wasn't really fair to compare the best area under curve run I had with the DNA Stage 2 lid. Figured, let me see what it looks like when I compare it to the worst one I have. And it's still very similar, right? The area of gains grew a little bit. The losses on top are not quite as much. But it still comes down to what is your priority. If you prioritize this mid-range, then you might want to ante up for the DNA Stage 2 lid. But otherwise, looking like for the Arrow exhaust with the stock cams, for me, I would leave the Airbox alone and just replace the filter when it was due to be replaced. I certainly wouldn't throw out a clean stock filter to upgrade it to a Sprint or a DNA. So thanks guys for watching. Remember to subscribe and like button for more motorcycle related content. There'll be plenty of R9 stuff coming moving forward, and I appreciate you all. Remember, head on over to vcyclenaut.com for very best in your ECU flashing needs and performance parts. Peace.